Hello guys and welcome back to my video, and today we are gonna do chapter 7, Diversity in Living Organisms, class 9th. Now you'll definitely know that there are millions and billions kinds of organisms, and we need to study them. And if you ask why we need to study them, there are probably more than one answers. For example, we need to know that how each and every organism is connected to the other, and we also need to know that how humans evolved and how we are connected to our ancestors and who are our ancestors actually. And some people believe that we need to study other organisms in order to make a better version of them. Let me give you an example. Look at this guy here. Why do you think this looks like a wolf? Because with the help of our studies, we were able to know that we can breed two different organisms in order to make a better species. So this is a husky dog, and it is a mixed breed of a dog and a wolf, and that means it will have both the traits of a dog and a wolf. So in short, this species has a better chance of surviving. So now if I'm able to persuade you that we need to study the organisms, let's carry on. So now we can agree to the point that we need to study the organisms. And like I told you, there are millions and billions of species. So we can't study them individually. That would take millions and billions of years, which is physically and theoretically impossible for humans only. I guess Thor could live that long. Anyway, let's get on the point. So in order to study these millions and billions of species, we need to classify them. And how will we classify them? Well, we'll look for some really fundamental traits, and then we will put them into different groups. And there are a couple of fundamental characteristics that we can see while classification of species. We can see things like whether they are prokaryotes or eukaryotes. Now if you don't know what that means, prokaryote means organisms which don't have a real nucleus. By the way, nucleus is the part of the cell where all the information is stored. And eukaryotes are those organisms which do have a real nucleus in their cells. Now you might think, if there is no nucleus, there is no information. So how does a prokaryote work? And the answer to that is with the help of nucleoid. Or we can see that whether the organism lives in a colony or whether they survive singularly. Like ants, for example, they live in colonies. And we can see things like whether they do prepare their own food, means are they autotrophs, or do they depend on other organisms for their food, means are they heterotrophs. And some more things like cell structure, their complexity, and etc. we can see while classifying organisms. Now taking few of your seconds, I have a question here. Like here you can see they have clearly written biodiversity means the diversity of life forms. So why didn't they just name the chapter biodiversity? I know it sounds stupid, but I'll be glad if you answer it. Well, let's carry on and let's talk about classification and evolution. And you might already know that classification helps us to understand evolution. Like if we classify all the organisms, we'll be able to see how much we have evolved. Now there are two classes here. One is primitive class and other is advanced class. Just like class 9th and class 11th. Anyway, first one is primitive class. And the organisms whose body design hasn't changed for a long period of time, they fall into the category of primitive class. Like their body design is a little bit simpler because they didn't need to evolve in order to survive. They could survive with what they had. On the other hand, the organisms which have developed or evolved recently to survive or to make a better species, they will fall into the category of advanced class. they will have a much complex design as compared to the primitive class. I'll give you the examples later. Do you remember I told you that we will put organisms into different groups in order to classify them? Now there is a problem here. For example, a cat, a dog and a human all are animals. So we should put them in one group, right? But they are so different we can't put them in one group. So to overcome this problem, our dear scientists developed a hierarchy of the classification groups. You can think of it like finding a word in a dictionary. Like for example, if you need to find a word book, then first you'll go for the letter B, then you'll go for the letter O, then O, and then at last K. So this hierarchy is just like finding a word in a dictionary. And it goes something like this: kingdom, phylum for plants and division for animals, class, order, family, genus, and species. Now in order to remember these, I have a really good example. So this is a school and this is your kingdom. And suppose तुम्हें कोई लेने आता है तुम्हारे घर से and they don't know कि कहाँ ढूंढे तुम्हें. So how will they find you? First they'll find your kingdom, that is your school. And your school has two wings, that is junior wing and senior wing, and we will call them divisions or phylum. And then there is obviously your class, like you are in class 9th, so let's keep it 9th. Then the order represents the section of your class, like for example 9th A, 9th B or 9th C. Now you will be obviously sitting in a row, and that row you are sitting in is your family. Like in order to find you, we'll have to look into your family, like we will have to see that in which row you are sitting. And then genus represents the bench you are sitting on. And once we get to your bench, we will finally find the species, which is you. So this is how I remembered it, and this is how you can remember it also. So now when we know the hierarchy of classification groups, we will study or know more about the topmost part of the hierarchy, which is kingdom. So there are total of 5 kingdoms, namely MONERA, PROTISTA, FUNGI, PLANTAE and ANIMALIA. So let's study about them individually. So first is MONERA. So let me give you the examples first. Blue-green algae and bacteria lies in this category, and they don't have a very complex body design. They don't have a proper nucleus, they don't have multicellular body design, some of them may or may not have cell walls, and they may be heterotrophs or autotrophs. The next one is Protista, and this kingdom consists of only eukaryotes. Like the kingdom MONERA had prokaryotes, these are eukaryotes, which means their body design must be a little bit better as compared to MONERA. And these organisms use some hair-like structures or whip-like structures to move around. And again, they can be autotrophs or they can be heterotrophs. Some of the examples are unicellular algae, amoeba, and paramecia. And next on the list is fungi. So all the organisms in this kingdom are heterotrophs for sure. The only difference is some of them will need decaying matter and some of them will have to survive on living organisms, to whom we called saprotrophs and parasites respectively. So now if you are noticing, we are moving to more complex organisms. So definitely they'll have a well-defined cell wall to protect themselves. They mostly survive singularly, but at some point of time they might end up living in colonies. Some of them might be living in a permanent mutual relationship with blue-green algae, which we called symbiotic relationship, and these symbiotes are called eventually like, जिनसे हम लोग litmus paper बनाते हैं. And yes, by the way, their cell walls are created with the substance, sugar substance, which is called shit. And some of very common examples: paracelium and mushrooms, obviously Now if you're thinking these were way too small for a bio chapter, this from exam point of view, these kingdoms aren't very important. मतलब क्वेश्चन आ सकते हैं, बट दे आर नॉट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एज कम्पेयर टू द नेक्स्ट टू. सो नेक्स्ट ऑन द लिस्ट इज प्लांटे किंगडम, which consists of multicellular eukaryotes. Eukaryotes मैंने तुम्हें पहले बता दिया है, and multicellular means a lot of types of cells, and they are autotrophs, use chlorophyll and for photosynthesis, and we'll study about it more in the next video क्योंकि बहुत ज़्यादा detailed है इसलिए. And next on the list is animalia, जिसमें हम लोग भी आते हैं. So they are multicellular eukaryotes again, but this time they are heterotrophs, and yes, they don't have cell walls. And just like Plantae, we'll discuss it in the next video. And now, when we have studied about all the kingdoms, let me give you the example of simpler and advanced or complex organisms. The simpler class will consist of organisms like amoeba and bacteria. लाइक ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं होता है, ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी नहीं होती है, बस अपना खाते पी, आपको बहुत सारे ऑर्गन्स नहीं मिलेंगे, बहुत सारी अलग अलग चीज़ें नहीं हो रही होंगी, तो दे आर सिंपल. ऑन दी अदर हैंड वी द ह्यूमन्स आर कॉम्प्लेक्स. अब आपको हम में बहुत सारी कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी मिलेगी. वी हैव डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम, वी हैव कार्डियो सिस्टम, वी हैव आर न्यूरो सिस्टम, सो देयर आर अ लॉट ऑफ कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी इन दिस वन बॉडी. So that's why we are more advanced and they are more primitive or simpler. And before going, my friends, just have a look at this very important flowchart. I don't think there is much to explain. ये तुम्हें खुद ही याद करना पड़ेगा और खुद ही बनाना पड़ेगा. There are very high chances कि ये पेपर में आए. And I guess this is all for today's video. We'll continue the other kingdoms in the next video. अगर मैंने डाल दी होगी तो you'll find the link in the description. And thanks for watching guys. बस पढ़ते रहना, अपना ध्यान रखना, and मैं मिलूंगा आपसे नेक्स्ट वीडियो में. तब तक के लिए गुड बाय, सायोनारा.